What's up, and welcome to the Nothing But Net Worth podcast, where we have conversations with prominent coaches, athletic directors, and NIL athletes discussing critical topics around financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and much, much more. My name is Hassan Thomas, former student athlete and current promoter of all things financial wellness. And today, we have America's premier financial presenter, storyteller, and the first approved financial speaker by the NCAA, Mr. Eric Smith. How are you, my man? How are you?
Hey, Hassan, good to be with you. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me. And congratulations on everything you're doing with this podcast and all the impact you're making. So I'm excited to chop it up with you for a few minutes. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Super glad to have you on here. And normally how we like to start our show is we have a segment called the Financial Coin Toss. So I'm going to ask you a few either or questions just to see where your head's at, all right?
Okay.
All right. We're here talking about these NIL student athletes because now they're able to literally make money off their name, image, and likeness. So in your opinion, talking about this new generation of college athletics, for these students, which is more important in your opinion? How much money they can make or how much money these NIL athletes can keep?
And really, we've heard that it's more important what we do with what we make than how much we make, right? Because you can make $1 million, and if you spend $1 million, you really haven't created any wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of name, image, and likeness, Hassan, I call it new income to leverage, right? And by leveraging, what I'm talking about is taking this newfound opportunity and this new source of money and leveraging it so that we create wealth opportunities. We create opportunity to give to certain communities, to help people. And so for me, that's really what I focus on is leveraging those opportunities by educating and inspiring people to do certain things with this money that 4 years ago they didn't have, right? And so for me, whether you call it NIL or rev share or Alston or stipend, it's an opportunity to do something good with a financial opportunity that they have at that point in their life.
I'm still stuck on the new income to leverage. That is fire. That is fire. And I think that hits right to the point where you said these student athletes now have this opportunity to do something that they weren't able to do in 2020 and previous. So I think it's awesome. And before we dive too deep into the actual NIL, I want to learn more about your story and how you got to this point, because I feel like every athlete, every entrepreneur has a moment. They have that turning point in their life where they're like, okay, I'm about to take this leap. I'm about to chase this passion. So really walk us through your turning point moment where you knew you wanted to help student athletes make an impact through their finances.
Sure, and I'll try to make it very short. So my official career began as a commercial banker in the Atlanta market. And this is back in the day when money was flowing freely, and we achieved a good bit of success early on. And as we were looking to expand, we decided to expand into the professional athlete space and started doing a private banking group, initially focused at Major League Baseball players. And then as you know, the pro athlete space is actually a fairly small space. Once you get in it, there's a lot of people such as agents that have baseball clients, football and basketball. And so as a result of that, we ended up banking a lot of NBA players, a lot of NFL players. And that's really how I got into the world of athletics. It wasn't initially designed to get into the world of college athletics. Sometimes, Hassan, it's kind of funny how life works. You think you're going to go down one path, and then all of a sudden you get a roadblock, and that door seems to be closing, but yet another door opens. And so you and I both, I think, share the same outlook. Chase your passion. If you're helping other people and you got some skills, good things normally happen to you.
For sure.
And so we started this, and we had business managers referring us all these professional athletes. And Hassan, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I thought, hey, I'm just as smart as some of these guys. And so while I was still part of a group running regional banks in the Southeast, I started doing a little business management on the side. I had 4 guys in the league, and I did that for about a year and a half. And again, I didn't know what I didn't know until I got into it. I had the skill set to make their lives better, but I really didn't have the appetite or the patience for that role. And a good friend of mine who was the chaplain of the Atlanta
Kind of being a
Falcons.
babysitter a little bit. Is that what it was?
That was part of it. And, hey, I go to bed early, like at 10 o'clock. And I'm getting phone calls at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, my ATM card's not working. Stuff like that, right?
Got you.
And so I got frustrated with that. I just didn't feel like that was the role that I was made to be in. And I had some great experiences, don't get me wrong. But, I'm all about trying to walk in your purpose and your passion. And a friend of mine, James Trapp, who was the chaplain for the Atlanta Falcons, who I'd become friends with, said, hey, E, why don't you create a class to teach the guys coming into the league just common sense financial, fundamentals. And so I went there and met all the coaching staff, and they were great. But they said, Eric, you're a great guy, but you want to save everybody, and not everybody needs saving. And they said, a third of the guys don't want you, a third of the guys don't need you, but why don't you focus on the third that actually do want the knowledge that you can share? But we really feel like the noise is too loud at this level. Why don't you get them while they're in college?
Wow.
And
so this was still the chaplain who said that for the Falcons?
This was still a guy named Kevin Winston, who's still in player engagement in the NFL. He and his brother Lamont have done some great things. But it was some of the best advice that I'd ever been given because Kevin, again, I didn't really know that space, and Kevin was an expert in it. And he said, hey, you can do some good, but why don't you go get them while they're in college? And so I approached the NCAA and said, hey, why don't you guys hire me to go around just teaching financial ed? I didn't want to sell anything. I didn't want to get clients. I just wanted to do the programming. I love doing workshops, right?
Yeah.
And I love kind of rolling up my sleeves, and doing the hard work. And so I approached them, and long story short, I became, after a series of tests that they put me through, became the first financial educator on the NCAA speakers list. And back in the day, if you were a lower resource D1 school and you wanted a life skill presenter, you could bring in one of these speakers off the list, and they would pay for that person to come to your campus. I've been there ever since, and I love doing what I do, and I love the people that I do it for. And so I've got one of the best jobs in the world.
Man, I think we have to shout you out for being a lifelong learner, for one, because you were already successful, real estate, banking, you were already successful. And the fact that you were still open to listen to someone, take their advice and pivot is awesome. So shout out to you for that. Everybody listening, let's kind of take that into our game. But I want to get from you, staying on the college athletes, what do you feel is the most important money lesson student athletes should learn in college to be prepared for the pros or just life after college?
Well, previous to NIL, you would always hear that everybody has this delusional dream that they're going to play in the league, right? And the stats are that, majority of even the folks at the D1 level aren't going to make it to a professional spot.
Yeah.
Well, and so the conversation was a little bit different back before NIL, right? It was like, all right, we've got a little bit of money. Hopefully you're going to get to a point where you make some significant money.
Yeah.
And so our role right now is just to prepare you if you get to that next step. Well, now that next step has come to them in a lot of ways, right? And so I think for most of us that are in this space, the reality is that the need or the awareness that you got to have a plan.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's really what financial literacy is about. It's about understanding how to do certain things with money. But, there's a second, just as important step, Hassan. Once you've been taught, then you got to do it, right? All the knowledge in the world. Yeah. If you don't execute, I mean, it really is for naught. And so for me, to answer your question, I think the most important part about this is you got to have a plan. You got to be prepared. For example, just the other day, I was helping a D1 baseball player and his
Yeah.
parents open up a Roth IRA. Well, they got a sizable sum of money, and so they didn't know what to do with it. And so
Mm-hmm.
my first suggestion was, you got to have a plan. And some of this, to be candid, when it comes to wealth creation, I try to stay in my lane. And so, I said, hey, I'm happy to bring some other people in this conversation, but I said, you got to have a plan. And part of
Mm-hmm.
this, how much are you going to save? What are you going to invest? We can't forget about taxes,
Come
right?
on.
And taxes, this is a great lesson to be able to share with people how our tax systems work. But,
Mm-hmm.
this thing called self-employment tax is going to catch a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah,
And
it's
so,
real.
yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, it's going to happen probably after they leave the college campus, not
Oh
during it.
wow.
And so for me, it just said, hey, what? It screamed, there's even more of a sense of urgency to teach the basics on how to come up with a plan, how to
Mm-hmm.
spend my money, how to save my money, and just how to handle some of these distractions.
So really just making sure that you have an intentional plan that you can execute. It's good to get the information, it's good to get the education, but actually applying that education that you learned from you, from iGrad, from the other financial institutions that are helping out, and actually applying that information. So that makes a lot of sense. Making sure they're having that intentional plan. As far as just NIL in its entirety, what's your thoughts? Has it been positive for the NCAA? Has it been negative? What's just your overall thoughts on NIL?
Well, I can't speak from the NCAA's perspective, but so let me just share it for what I've seen from the student athlete's perspective. You
Okay.
know, I think it's been a great thing, right? I think that these athletes deserved a long time ago to be paid for the use of their name or their image or likeness, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think that that's a great thing. But I think it's also an evolving thing. I think that just in 3 short years, you've seen a ton of changes related to NIL. And I think that that's going to happen in the next 3 years. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that NIL today is going to look like it's going to look like maybe 3 years from now.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot of positives that come about. The reality is most of the student athletes, Hassan, that I meet, they're not getting $1 million a year. They're not even
Mm-hmm.
getting 100,000 a year, right? And to me, it doesn't matter to me whether you're getting 3,000 a year or 53,000. It still screams out, hey, I got to have a game plan
For sure.
because this is money I didn't have last year or before I got to this space. And so I got
Mm-hmm.
to come up with something to ensure that I do something really good and I leverage this opportunity to benefit my life down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, again, the advantage is that people are talking about it. A lot of people understanding, hey, I got to do something to educate. Now the NCAA came out with a transformation committee recommendation, and one of these programming suggestions or requirements was financial literacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's great, right? I think it should have already been a mandate for years past, but better late than never. And I'm glad that that's what they're requiring. So for me,
Mm-hmm.
financial literacy has been more of the conversation. Everybody understands that, hey, we need this. Obviously, there's a difference of opinion on how do we address that. But companies like iGrad and what you guys have been doing on the digital platforms,
Mm-hmm.
providing 24/7 access to empowering content, I think that's crucial, and I think it's going to become even more crucial going forward because but what is the term? We're micro learners, right?
Yeah.
We want to get on and watch a little snippet for 2 minutes, and and I think there's nothing wrong with that as long as the little snippet has real information, factual
Mm-hmm.
information that's helping people, and so that's I love the work that iGrad has been doing in the past, and I think that that's critically important.
I want to dive into something that you said though. You said you think that NIL is going to look a little bit different within the next 2 to 3 years. What is your guesstimate on what it's going to look like in the future?
I wouldn't be surprised, especially for some of the Power Four, Power Five schools.
Mm-hmm.
Once they get into the rev share model, I would not be surprised if you see some of the NIL collectives being brought in house
Mm.
and made part of the funding arm. Because the reality is, uh, in some cases, you're almost in a bidding war to get some of these athletes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the obstacles when you start making decisions about, all right, in order to be able to compete with the next school in our conference, we're going to have to come up with some rev share. We got to come up with $22 million,
Yeah.
right? And so how do we come up with $22 million if we were barely making any money? Well, that may require reorganization of staff. It may be requiring reduction of some teams.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start having that conversation, of course, I have no insight on any of this, right?
For
This
sure.
is
Just your
this is
guesstimate.
just
Yeah.
yeah, just my opinion. But I would not be surprised because of Title IX that you see some men's teams be relegated to a club level, in the next couple of years. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing is, Hassan, is that my concern is about donor fatigue, right? I love the NIL, but from what I'm seeing at some of these schools is some of the donors are already kind of getting a little worn out because not only are they expected to pay for facilities and expansions
Uh-huh.
on campus, they now have another source that their money can go to, and that's NIL. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that the
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 well's
schools,
running a bit dry.
yeah, well, it's especially if your team, because Hassan, as you know, everybody wants you to win now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel sorry for some of these high paid college coaches and people would say, why would you feel sorry for them? Because the expectation is if you can't produce a winner in 3 years, you're out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the same thing is, hey, the expectancy is, hey, we've got to do something now. And sometimes that's a difficult expectation to meet.
Wow. So this was a quick hitter of a lot of great gems from the number one financial presenter in the nation, the America's premier financial presenter. Leave our listeners a bit of game, a bit of advice on how they can continue to get better with their finances, continue to leverage their new finances.
Well, everybody and anybody listening to your podcast has some amount of money coming in their life on a regular basis. And
Facts.
so it screams, hey, we've got to have a plan so that whatever your opportunities are, and we all have different financial opportunities. Nobody's is exactly the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, Hassan, if you have a job that pays you $45,000 a year or a job that pays you $345,000, there's still an opportunity to do something special with the money that you have. Now,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, the less money you make, the more important it is that you understand how to handle that money,
Yeah.
right? And so for a lot of people that, especially today, as expensive as things are with inflation and people are struggling, understanding just basic money management, which is really what I focus on,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't profess to be the smartest guy in the world, but I do profess to be probably the most passionate guy
Mm-hmm.
in the country in this space doing what I do. And I just want to see everybody have a better financial life and live the life that I think they were truly intended to live, not
Mm-hmm.
one with full of a bunch of stress. So for me, this is a positive chance to say, hey, you know what? You got some really, you're 19 or 20 years old or
Yeah.
18. You got the whole world ahead of you. You've got this certain amount of money, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't we come up with a plan for how you can leverage that to make your short term and your long term life better? And that's what effective financial literacy does, in my opinion.
I
And
love it.
so I'm going to keep on doing what I do. My goal is 1 million student athletes. So I guess when I hit 1 million, I'll figure out what my goal is at that point. But I got a lot of work left to do, and to me, it's just a great opportunity to be able to share the skills that I've acquired
Mm-hmm.
in financial services to help other people. Because, Hassan, one of the things that is that for the last 30, 40 years, we have not been teaching financial management skills that most people need in order to function and excel in life. And so,
100%.
right,
But I
thankfully,
really appreciate. I'm sorry. I gotta go hop on this credit union call. But Thank you so much for joining the show.
You're very
Thank you
welcome.
for all of our listeners. If you're looking to be educated, motivated, and inspired to not only stay in the game, but to change it, the Nothing But Net Worth podcast is for you. See y'all next week.
Check it out.